fanfiction reading of Tales of Symphonia, His Last Chance by LadyMercelia. Lloyd adjusted his tie awkwardly. It felt strange being in such attire, but it was a special day, so he thought he could deal with it. Today was the day that his companions, Zelos and Sheena, were to get married. Despite all their bickering, the two had been in a relationship for quite a while after the journey ended, and he and Zelos, though they had argued a lot, were close friends, and Zelos chose Lloyd to be his best man. Figuring he had nothing to lose, Lloyd accepted. To be honest, Lloyd knew next to nothing about weddings. They weren't very common back in Cilia, so he had never been to one. He had no idea what he was expected to do as best man. Hopefully Zelos would fill him in. But knowing the former chosen, Lloyd reasoned it would be best to ask Sheena. Sheena opened the door to her dressing room and smiled as she saw Lloyd. "Doesn't look too bad on you," she smirked, referring to the suit he was wearing. "Sheena, I need some help," Lloyd said, nodding his head, asking for permission to step inside. The woman nodded as he stepped foot into a large room full of large mirrors, flowers, and a bright white dress hanging on the wall. Lloyd sat down inside. "What did Zelos do to you this time?" Sheena mocked. "It's just, I have no idea what I'm supposed to do for this wedding. Zelos didn't tell me anything about it," Lloyd said, waiting for Sheena to laugh. But to his surprise, she didn't. "Eh?" she scoffed. "He didn't?" She sighed deeply and crossed her arms. "Geez, the idiot. Well, I guess I'll try my best to inform you then. Now listen up, Lloyd." Sheena continued. "After the bride and groom begin dancing, the best man and bridesmaid are second to dance. And it isn't some type of silly dancing either. It's slow dancing. Do you know how to slow dance, Lloyd?" "Slow dance?" Lloyd said, trying to remember. "I sort of know the basics, but that's about it." "Hey, Sheena, do you mean I have to dance with someone?" Sheena nodded. "That's right, you have to dance with the bridesmaid." "Bridesmaid," Lloyd repeated, leaning over and placing his elbows on his knees. "But who is the bridesmaid?" Lloyd wasn't much of a dancer. He didn't want to make a fool of himself. But I also didn't like the idea of dancing with some girl when he really already had someone he was, well, fond of. Zelos didn't tell you that either," Sheena said, surprised. "Of all the things. I figured you at least know that." Sheena laughed and scratched her head. "So?" Lloyd said, pressing on for an answer. "Well, Colette, of course." Lloyd's face flushed red, and Sheena must have noticed. "Hey, what's wrong, Lloyd?" She smirked. "Do you not want to dance with Colette?" No, it's not that," Lloyd blurted out. In truth, it sounded wonderful dancing with Colette, the girl he was in love with. Sheena smiled compassionately. "Worried you're about to look stupid, is that it?" Lloyd nodded, not able to form the words as his face burned deep scarlet. Sheena sighed sympathetically. "Don't worry, I'm sure it'll be fine." She lied, not actually sure it would be, not wanting him to be stressed over it. She quickly came up with a plan B. Maybe ask Zelos for some pointers. He's an idiot sometimes, but he can actually be rather useful, she said, a light pink blush appearing on her cheeks. As Lloyd left the room, he sighed and stuck his hands in his newly discovered suit pockets. Asking Zelos for advice about Colette was the last thing he wanted to ever do, seeing as all the perverted redhead could recommend was, well... Lloyd's face turned dark velvet red as he thought of it. The whole idea of it was, he felt... Lloyd's face became rather distorted as he was horrified at not even knowing what he was trying to get at. Quickly brushing that aside as fast as he could, he walked up to the former chosen's room. Here goes nothing. The door swung open, and without opening his eyes, Zelos gave off his normal, "Yo, honey!" But as his eyes opened to find Lloyd, he looked slightly disappointed. Lloyd rolled his eyes. "Zelos, I need some help." He sighed, inviting himself in. Unlike he did for Sheena, honestly, he didn't care much about manners when it comes to Zelos. Zelos looked rather surprised. Normally, Lloyd would never imagine asking him for advice. So, this was a first. Zelos decided to lay off the teasing for a bit and actually try to help. For this, Lloyd was grateful. The redhead nodded and closed the door behind them. Lloyd fidgeted with his tie, incredibly nervous. The ceremony was about to begin. Even after some advice from Zelos, he was nearly shaking. Even after their long adventure together, Lloyd had still not yet to confess to Colette. He knew he was in love with her. He knew way before they even set off. The journey only deepened his love for her. showing him what it would be like to be without her. He had so many chances back then, on their journey to confess to her. He cursed as his former self for not doing so, thinking that somehow he would have had the courage to confess, though in time, in the back of his mind, he knew well enough that he wouldn't have been able to anyways. He always got choked up when he was alone with her. Though he hid it rather well, he always got incredibly distracted as well. Her glimmering golden hair, her soft pink lips, her deep blue eyes, her soft delicate hands. Everything about her made him tense up. But most of all, her smile. It was a smile that could light up the room. Even in the darkest of times, thinking on it now, he used to take that beautiful smile for granted. Before that, he never took notice of it, just how precious it was. It wasn't until that smile was taken away that he realized how much it meant to him. When she lost her soul, he began to realize all he had taken for granted. Her blue eyes no longer sparkled. Her gold hair no longer swayed with her movement. Her soft hands never moved, and her soft pink lips didn't respond at all. Though Lloyd was strangely grateful that she couldn't feel anything during that time, he was rather ashamed and embarrassed to admit that the only time he was able to confess to her was when she wasn't able to hear, nor feel. If she had felt, he wouldn't know what he would do if his secret was discovered. Indeed, while she had lost her soul, Lloyd was desperate, and he kissed her, hoping it would revive her. And although she couldn't feel it or remember it, it meant the world to him. It was just a soft, gentle kiss, but it really was full of compassion, full of feelings he was unable to say. Now the thought of dancing with her arms cradled in his, her head on his chest, it was rather overwhelming, but he wanted it. He really did. In fact, he wanted her to be his only. He didn't want anybody to even lay a finger on her. Lloyd was snapped out of his thoughts when he was dragged onto a stage by a rather enthusiastic Zelos. Looking around, Lloyd saw all his companions in the crowd as well, but one caught his eye. To the right of him were LadyMercelia, and of course the gorgeous blonde holding a bouquet of flowers. A beautiful baby blue dress that came down to her knees flowed in a gentle breeze. Lloyd felt his knees getting weak when he was elbowed by Zelos. "Hey, you look like a dork staring at her like that, you know," he whispered. Lloyd choked, not realizing that he had been staring at her. He looked back at the crowd and saw Gina smirking at him in the back. Damn it, who else saw? Damn you, Genus. Lloyd jumped as music started to play, and the door swung open. The crowd gasped as Sheena began to walk down the aisle. Genus looked, following in front, carrying a small pillow which Lloyd assumed held the rings. Sheena's long dress flowed elegantly behind her. Looking over at Zelos, he wasn't able to describe his expression. Something like wonder, happiness, love, joy, and quite a few other emotions. Lloyd couldn't quite point out. It was strange. Seeing the redhead like this, normally he never really looked that way at anyone. Even back on their adventure, he didn't look at his honeys like this. Lloyd smiled, wondering if this was the happiness that came with finally being united with the one you love. As Sheena stepped up next to Zelos, Regal got out a rather old-looking book and began to read off. As he talked, Zelos took the ring from Genus and slipped on his soon-to-be wife's hand. "Do you, Zelos Wilder, take Sheena Fujibashi to be your wife?" "Hell yeah, I do," Zelos smirked, making everyone sigh. "Do you, Sheena Fujibashi, take Zelos Wilder to be your husband?" Sheena paused as if thinking about it. "Oi, Sheena," Zelos whined as the woman laughed. "I do," she said between giggles. With that, Regal spoke in a clear voice, "You may kiss the bride." Sheena gasped as Zelos grabbed her bridal style and planted a firm kiss on her lips. The crowd cheered, and when they parted, you could hear her soft growl of, "Hey, put me down, you stupid chosen," from Sheena. Lloyd turned around as he heard some giggles. He had forgotten who was at his side. Rain merely sighed at the sight of the two, but Colette and Mercelia, on the other hand, giggled at Sheena's antics. Colette sighed, a dreamy look in her eyes, as she looked at the two. They sure do look happy, don't they? Indeed, in their own strange way, they are very happy. Mercelia nodded, smiling lightly. "All right," Sheena called out enthusiastically, clutching a bouquet in her hand. She chucked it into the air, and the crowd gasped, and hands reached out to catch it. Sheena turned around, her face practically glowing. "Who caught it?" The crowd turned around and slowly made an opening. There at the end stood none other than Colette, holding the bouquet. Her face became scarlet. Nice, Colette, Sheena said, pumping her fist in the air. So, Colette, if you're next to get married, I wonder who it will be. Sheena smirked as Colette began to stare. I. She stuttered, her face dark red. Sheena began to say something else which made the girl blush even more, and turned to look if Lloyd had heard it. Thankfully he hadn't, because Genus walked up to him. Hey, Lloyd, Colette's going to be the next one to get married, eh? He said in an evil glint in his eyes. Yeah, I guess, Lloyd said, looking away from his best friend, feeling his cheeks start to heat up. Say, Lloyd, by any chance, is your face red because you want to marry her? Genus said, getting more and more devious by the second. Lloyd gasped and nearly fell over. Shut up, Genus. He nearly shouted in embarrassment. Oh, what a shame it would be, though. You haven't even told her how you felt. How can you possibly marry her? She doesn't even know how you feel. The silver-haired boy continued as Lloyd's throat became incredibly dry. I wonder, does that mean since Colette's next to get married that somebody else will snatch her up? Because you never had the guts to tell her? Though his friend was just teasing him, Lloyd took those words to heart. Lloyd clenched his teeth and looked away, his hands becoming tight. Fists, what would he do if that was true? What would he do if he never told Colette how he felt? And she married some other man. He couldn't be happy for her. It was impossible. He would be. Gina seemed to realize he took the teasing a little too far and put his hands on his friend's arms. Don't worry, Lloyd. I'm sure that won't happen. If it's really bugging you, then why don't you go tell her? Lloyd looked over at his friend, his face still showing some signs of distress. But he nodded. Genus was right. He had missed all the other perfect chances to tell her. Today he would tell her. He made up his mind. He wouldn't let some guy snatch Colette away from him. Music began to play, and Sheena and Zealous could be seen dancing. Lloyd gulped profusely in a few minutes. He would have to dance with Colette. His hands became slightly sweaty. Lloyd! He turned around sharply as a soft voice. Colette was looking at him. All right, he could do this. He held out his hand, and the girl shyly intertwined her fingers into his. Unluckily for them, the dance floor was a bit elevated from the ground. Not knowing this, Colette tripped over it, but was quickly caught by Lloyd, her head resting gently on his chest as she looked up and blushed. Be cool, Lloyd. Don't make a fool of yourself, he told himself in his mind. Thank you, Lloyd, Colette said, smiling. You really are always there to catch me when I fall. Lloyd felt his face heat up, but tried really hard to keep his cool. I'm glad then to be the one that's there for you, he said softly. This caused her to blush even more. He liked this feeling, the feeling of making her blush. He wanted to be the only one to ever make her blush like this. He never wanted her to blush for anyone else ever again. He wanted her to be his. These thoughts continued as the two swayed slowly to the music. Neither of them were really good dancers. They were rather offbeat, but hey. They didn't seem to notice. Colette's face had rested firmly on Lloyd's chest, her soft hands on his shoulders. Lloyd, suddenly gaining a bit more courage, slid his hands down from her shoulders to her waist and gently held her. This felt so right in so many ways. Being there, holding her like this, it felt perfect, having her so close to him, her hands gently squeezing his shoulders. He wanted to stay like this forever. Regal sighed. I don't think he knows that he's supposed to dance with all the bridesmaids. Rain smiled softly. That's okay, I think it's better for him anyways, she said, smiling as her two students clumsily swayed to the beat. Geez, Gina sighed. Has he no manners? Persea giggled, making Gina's face flush bright red in less than a second. He said that he, too, wasn't going to wait any longer either. Persea, he said, holding out a trembling hand to her. Since Lloyd is busy, would you care to... He tried to say it, but he wasn't able to say that last word. His throat had gone completely dry. She seemed to get the hint and smiled at him, causing his face to redden even more. She took his hand, and he led her away rather clumsily towards the dance floor. By now there were quite a few people on the dance floor. Lloyd figured this was his chance. He gently backed up just enough to look at Colette. Can we go somewhere quieter? He said, trying to choose the best words possible. Sure. She smiled, and she grabbed his hands as he led her away from the party. He carefully took her to a small terrace out of the way of anyone else's peeping eyes. The view was amazing. You could see the whole city. He turned around and leaned on the railing. "What is it, Lloyd?" Colette said, addressing his sudden urge to leave the party. Lloyd gathered up his courage and grabbed her hands. "Colette, there's something I've wanted to tell you for the longest time." The young blonde looked a bit concerned. Did I upset you?" "Damn it, just damn it," Lloyd cursed at himself. No, not at all. It's just He struggled to find the words. "All those other times when they were alone, I wanted to say something. I wanted to tell you that." Colette looked at him in an adorably curious way, Lloyd thought. "Lloyd?" she asked, rather concerned by his silence. It was now or never, Lloyd said to himself. "Colette, I wanted to tell you how much I love you," he finally said, squeezing her hands gently. Her eyes widened in shock, and Lloyd could have sworn her eyes began to water. Damn it, he had messed up, hadn't he? But she quickly looked up at him, her face bright pink, a huge smile on her face, the smile Lloyd always loved. "Lloyd," she said, her eyes gleaming. "Do you mean it?" she said, and tears becoming a little more noticeable. Lloyd stuttered a bit, not sure what to say. Yeah, I mean it, Colette." The girl quickly wiped her eyes and smiled at him, giving him a bit more confidence. "Lloyd, I love you too." Lloyd's heart seemed to beat at the speed of light, as his face lit up, slightly pink. Though he had wanted her to say that, he hadn't expected her to. Somehow hearing her say that, those words, those beautiful words, he always wanted to hear, "Colette, that's great," he said, a huge smile on his face. More than anything, he really wanted to feel her soft lips again against his. Only, this time he wanted it to be real. He gathered up all of his courage and placing his hands on her shoulders, leaned in close to her. She didn't object, rather she leaned in as well. As their lips met, his hands slid down her shoulders and found their way into her hands. This was perfect. Their lips moved in sync, as if they were made only to meet each other's lips. Her hands fit perfectly in his, her soft skin pressing against his rather rough, worn-out skin. Slowly and shyly, Lloyd untangled one of his hands, placing it on her waist, pulling it closer to him. The kiss seemed to last for ages, as if the two had no intention to let it end. But in the end, when they pulled away, both their faces were bright red. They sat there, content with staring into each other's eyes for quite a while. Neither one of them knew their companions were hiding near the doorway. Watching them, Gina silently cheered for the best friend on. None of them wanted to interrupt. They all had known the two were in love for so long, and to be frank, it ticked them off that it was taking them so long. Colette was the first to look away, looking back at the wonderful view they had before them. Not taking a step, she cuddled into him, their elbows touching. Lloyd put his arms around her, and they stayed this way for quite a while. Thank you for listening. This has been the Fanfiction Reading.